Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.
Welcome to a Coffee with Karen. A cup of positivity with just a sprinkling of woo-woo. So each week, my guests will be sharing their experience either from a mental, a physical, or a spiritual perspective, or in some case, a combination of all three. So this week, my guest here, Ian, well, I'll let you share with the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit of your story.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm grateful for that. My background is twofold. This is going to excite many of your listeners. I'm an accountant by training. I still work sometimes as a finance director, normally interim or part-time or advisory, but I also do one-to-one coaching and training. And so on that side of things, the avenue I've gone down the most, although I think like many people, I've done numerous different elements, is I'm a doubly qualified neuro-linguistic programming trainer. There are three founders of NLP. I've trained with two of them to trainer level. So it's something I'm passionate about and taken seriously. And so that's my quick introduction. Those are the areas that I focus on. It's a portfolio mix of hardcore business stuff and more of the soft skills.
Fantastic. So how did that come about? What made you an accountant, then move on to more NLP? What was the attraction there?
Well, so the accountant goes back a very long time. I actually although I trained in a very large firm of accountants, which is normally as a graduate, I actually went straight from A-levels. So it's about 154 years ago. I trained in one of the big four firm of accountants.
You're looking well.
Thank you so much. My uncle is Yoda just over here. No, so I trained in one of the traditional big four firm of accountants, and I worked in industry as an accountant. And after I even did the traditional route of doing an MBA as well, and shortly after that, I remember is the timing, is I went, the classic introduction, I went on a talk for someone that had trained in NLP and did some fancy things, and I thought that's really interesting. And I went on an introductory weekend. So this is now, I mean, all joking aside about all the time, but this is 20 years ago. Actually, I think almost it'll be something very close to 20 years ago. And I did, and I really liked it. I went on an introductory weekend, did some techniques to help people, and I thought, wow, like people having breakthroughs just on that weekend of, emotional outpourings type breakthroughs. And I thought to myself, well, it's just a wonderful feeling, isn't it, to help somebody go from A to B? And in the back of my mind, even so I haven't spoken about in this much detail for a very long time, but in the back of my mind, I remember a lady I'd paired up with, she had a situation with her dad, on a personal relationship, and just she got a new perspective, and it was just, you've really helped this person. And now the bit that I don't have an answer is that you now have to skip a long time. And in 2014, I know I read numerous books, and I've done all sorts of mentoring and went on different mentoring and some other coaching courses, but it wasn't until 2014 that I did my what's called practitioner. And I just had an opportunity between contracts as an accountant and project manager. And I went off to Spain and did with one of the founders and his senior master trainer in the UK to Spain and did a 14-day practitioner plus another 5 days of what's called the Healer Within, a specialist looking at NLP for healing as well. So, and it just went from there over the following 3 years, 2014 to 2017, I became a doubly qualified trainer, numerous courses in different, so even on top of that, some specialist stuff to do with taking away the fear of presenting, so it just became a passion. And I'm still working with it today, and frankly, still trying to get the balance right of a portfolio of professional things, working in both areas of both finance or finance department, I should say, and stroke business, and sort of the coaching and training.
Right. Do the two sort of intermingle at times, though?
Well, absolutely. I try very hard to be consistent with the NLP skills, because the communication side of it, the understanding another person, really trying to take in their perspective, helping somebody go from A to B, making sure you're on the same page is so core to business conversations. Whether you're a line manager, whether you're in charge of a department, a business, whether you're negotiating with a supplier, trying to raise finance, whatever it is, if you've got a little bit of extra skill to help you make sure you're on the same page as somebody else, or different parties are on the same page in a project management environment, it's really very useful. So they merge like that. And obviously, coaching somebody, when I've taken on interim roles, it's so rare that someone's quite passionate about that the people are so grateful. Like, they almost can't quite believe their luck, because I don't announce it. I don't say I'm going to charge you extra. If I'm there as an interim, I would just say to the people in my team, look, if this is interesting to you, I'm happy to do the odd coaching session whilst I'm here. And obviously they can't, I don't want to sound something I'm not. However, they generally can't believe their luck, because it just doesn't happen.
Right.
You might get a line review, you might have annual targets, you may even be lucky and get some kind of investment to go on a course, but I think it's still quite rare that somebody gets one-to-one coaching through their work.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So they're very, very fortunate. So today's topic is emotional management. So how would you explain that really to the listeners? What is it exactly?
I keep the definition really simple. Emotional management is the process of being in control, in essence, when you've had some kind of stimulus. And the stimulus will be an emotional input of some sort. That can be as simple as you got a phone call from somebody you didn't expect. It's a stimulus. To you've just been fired. I think anyone would generally agree that's pretty bad news. And it's how you control your emotions in that moment and thereafter with that stimulus.
Right.
That is emotional management. It's the process of remaining in control given a particular emotional situation.
Right. Because we do have some kind of natural response, right? When we come up against certain circumstances that do stimulate some kind of emotional response. It's interesting, isn't it, that we think we are in control consciously, but actually one thing can trigger us to feel a different feeling, and then we can have a different reaction, right?
Absolutely spot on. Yep.
It's just quite a fascinating subject, really. So how do you help people? I mean, how would you even promote that? I mean, because somebody would think, right, I don't need emotional management. What do I need emotional management for?
Well, I would. You just gave a really nice additional definition, and every day, right? We have somebody charges past you in the street, and you immediately, they may even bang your shoulder, may even hurt a bit. And how is your emotional response? Do you immediately go to expletives or even physical? Or is there an element of, wow, that person must really have something urgent to get to? And there's a beautiful example you'd think I was on commission, because very often I'll mention Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. And if one of your listeners hasn't read it, I can't recommend it enough. I think it's probably the best book written on anything to do with personal development from my perspective. Not that I've done book reviews, but I think it's a superb.
It's a great book.
And one of them is seek first to understand and then be understood. And he gives a really, sadly he's not with us anymore, but he gives the example so brilliantly that I'm none the wiser as to whether it was a real scenario or he's invented it to stress a point. But he talks about being on a train, and he's getting more and more, being honest, and saying, getting more and more agitated as kids are running around, like almost totally out of control. You could say totally out of control emotionally. And the dad is just sitting there in a world of his own. You could add words, not giving 2 hoots, something like that. And he's getting more and more agitated. And in the end, he turns to the dad and he says, do you think you could do something to control your children? And the dad sort of almost shakes his head out of a being in his own world, looks at him and says, "Yes, my apologies. Of course, I will. I will. It's just we've just come from the hospital. Their mother just died." And all of a sudden, he's like, "My goodness, I'm really sorry to hear that. How can I help you?" He had the emotional management to control his response to that new stimulus, that new bit of news. But the point is, when you say, how would somebody even know what it is? It's every day, all of the time. If someone's got children, how are you interacting with your children? Because, and it's what you touched on before when you did your own summary, there is a stimulus and there's a response. But what some people may find annoying is in the middle there's this thing called choice. And as humans, we're the only animals that have that ability to choose. And it can be really, it's so simple to say, but so immensely powerful if you choose to try to live by it.
Oh, I mean, that is, well, you really just hit the nail on the head there, haven't you? Is we do have the ability to choose, except some people can be so reactive to the stimulus that they don't even give themselves a chance to. And I suppose it goes back to, all the old sayings of count to 10, or all these things, I suppose, are designed to make us just pause before we
give yourself
react.
a moment to make a choice.
There you go. I mean, and that is such a powerful story, and just a reminder that we have to be a little bit more compassionate about, we do not know what is going on in somebody else's lives. So that reaction that he did there, like getting annoyed with the children running around, and the poor guy is just probably in shock and just not even switched on at all, and certainly doesn't want to tell his children off.
Yeah.
But that's just an incredible reminder that, we're all human, we're all going through our own stories, and we don't know, we have no clue of what's going on in the other person's story. So even if they did bump into us, yes, so what? Do we have a broken shoulder? No, not really.
Yeah. It's just, I've reminded people close to me that, when A is being, let's say, unpleasant to B, I'll say to B, look, I recognize it's not a pleasant experience, but just try to spend a few moments thinking about what's going on for A. And I know that's putting the onus on you, and the emotional management, shall we say, needs to come from you. But it is your choice as to how you respond to that stimulus. And keep in mind, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff going on for them. They're not happy with themselves, their current setup, whatever it might be. Just the example I gave before, just lost their job, haven't got enough money, relationship broke down, whatever it is. And so the verbal attack comes from A to B, and B's left there like drained and what's going on. And it's okay. I get it's not pleasant, but now breathe. Think to yourself, I wonder what's going on for them, and how do I want to respond? And listen, when someone's hearing this kind of stuff for the first time, what I'll always say is, if I love sports in general. If I took you onto a tennis court and you've never played tennis, if you're going to rock up and think you're going to have a perfect first serve every time on that first time you picked up a tennis racket, that's ridiculous. Why would you beat yourself up like that? And it's the same with these emotional things. It may even be harder because people have habits of behavior. They have stimulus that they're used to. They have programs that they run. And all of a sudden, someone's holding up a mirror and saying, you can respond differently if you want to. That is also your choice. You may not want to because it takes an effort, and even processing that can be difficult. However, it's a choice. It's absolutely a choice.
Absolutely, but and also there would be some of the listeners out there as well. Things that they do habitually, they might not even be aware that they've been doing it. So what you've just said there is just allowing them to, oh, yes. Once you're aware of something, then you have the power to change it, right? Before, otherwise, we're just running on autopilot and responding emotionally, I suppose, to certain stimulus without giving it a thought. And then So somebody like you coming in and actually sharing what is happening and breaking it down, because until it's broken down, somebody says that in front of us, then we can go, right, yes. And then they know that they do have the power to actually change things just by that. Hang on a minute. Breathe. So maybe some of those old wives' tales weren't too far off. That count to 10 before you react is actually incredible advice, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. At least giving yourself a chance to think about how you want to respond. It's a moment's pause before you pick up a shoe and throw it, or catch up with a person that bumped into you and put them in a headlock, only to find out that they also do jujitsu. I'm being a bit silly, but it is exactly those moments that 10 seconds can give you the chance to. And there's all sorts of things you can consider: to smile, to if somebody's got time to think about something, more physical output of some sort, like going for some exercise. And there's a beautiful saying that I've reminded myself of recently. And again, it's so immensely, in my opinion, so immensely powerful. And I'm pretty sure it's from 3 Principles Coaching, which I'm not qualified in, but I've read a lot about. And it's called, we have an infinite, well, the small saying is, we have an infinite well of thinking. We have an infinite, so it's endless, well of thinking. So here you are, you've got an initial response. And if you give yourself that 10 seconds, you change your breathing. That's another technique. Take a sharp intake of breath, just something to interrupt the pattern of the immediate response. And you accept that principle that we have an infinite well of thinking. Well, if you're not in control of your thoughts, who is? So, hello, then we're all in trouble. So let's kind of be on the same page and accept that we're in control of our own thoughts. And then if you accept there's an infinite well of thinking and you give yourself some time to adjust those thoughts, frankly, if you don't like the response you've just had, you can change it. And again, is that easy the first time? Probably not. For some people, probably yes. They just suddenly go, oh yeah, why am I angry all the time? There's really no point. And there is just a choice of changing your thinking if you are not happy with the current set of thoughts that you're having.
Right. Yeah. Are those habits, those habitual ways of reacting, are they serving you?
Yeah.
And if not, but it's funny you say that, we do, and I do totally agree. We do have the ability to control how we think. However, I would say not everybody is aware that they have that control, because also, there are thoughts that come to us from outside. You scroll through Facebook and something, that those thoughts enter our head from there. They're not originated from us. And yeah, I mean, I can be like, I'm terrible. I can look at something, think, oh, that looks good. Bye. No, I've really got to stop that.
Pair of shoes this month. Yay!
That looks really, really good. So there's a response that maybe is not always such a good thing. But I do totally believe that we do have the control over our conscious thoughts. But yes, I would add that not everybody is exercising that control. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, of course, including me. I'm not suggesting for a moment we all become RoboCop. And I think it would be difficult, but I suppose the extreme is probably is extreme the right word? But an example of someone that's probably excellent at this is that image that you have, a traditional of a Buddhist monk. Their life is about mantras, is about control. I heard a wonderful, I don't even know who was speaking, but it was on the radio. This is years ago, and they were talking about the classic Tibetan robe that they would wear. So one part of the shoulder is exposed, and the traditional orange robes that a Buddhist monk would wear. This lady, I think it was an airport in Ireland, and she said everybody was huddled together because they were outside before they could board the plane, and there was a group of monks in their orange robes, one half, a naked shoulder, and everybody was huddling together because it was so cold. And when you turned to look at the Buddhists, there was steam coming off them. They adjust with their minds. They had adjusted their temperature, controlled their temperature. So that's the extreme of emotional control and emotional.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just beautiful. I think I was probably driving. It just made me laugh out loud. But it was, my brother-in-law's been to see something just very similar. There was a chap that could almost raise the temperature of the room. And it's, this is after years of study and years of, dare I call it, in this one aspect, the emotional management. These, and I think they are always guys, these guys can, is the extreme of, there won't be a scenario. There is nobody that can bash them in the street and their response will be, let me show you some Shaolin Kung Fu. They'll probably immediately assess the options of why that person's under so much stress and how can they help.
Yeah.
That's the extreme.
Well, we can't even add them into the general. They're such
extreme.
phenomenon. Yeah, you're right. It's such an extreme. However, it's also isn't it interesting that they're still human? They can do it. So it just goes to show how we just really aren't using that much of our capacity as human beings. Obviously, yes, they've been trained from children. I know, but it just goes to show, doesn't it, the power of the mind. If people didn't believe it before, like, come on, you can't deny that fact with just that one story.
Yeah, and so the question is, how much better could all of us be with a bit of practice, a bit of practice on kindness, a bit of practice on positive intention. It's a lot, if you like, it's a lifestyle choice, or at least something if you never do this, and maybe it's preaching to the wrong people, but if you never do this, it's something you could add. So maybe on a Tuesday between the hours of midday and 5, you'll just see if you have an encounter where the first thing you can think is to breathe differently and wonder what's going on for the other person first, and then respond. I've never come up with that example before. Just
come from the top of your head. Well, no, that's it, isn't it? Show a little bit of compassion, and it's interesting that these monks really. Is it the training or is it actually the untraining? Because actually, what they're focusing on is actually the stopping, the slowing down of the mind, the not thinking. So actually, it's the undoing that makes them such phenomenal people. They're not actually doing it. Quite a lot of the time, they are spent in meditation.
Absolutely.
Aren't they? So actually, this power is coming from within, and I think we can all learn an awful lot from that, is because we're such doing creatures. We've got to do. I've got this to do, that to do. And it's only when we stop.
Yeah, that 10 seconds you talked about, the adjusting of your breathing, the infinite well of thinking and choosing a different response. As I say, I have to say it again. It's easy to talk about, and I do practice this in all being genuine. I try. It's how I choose to live and try to implement. And I'm a lot. I was about to say far from perfect. That's such a ridiculous thing to even say out loud. Because for sure I have my moments where something bothers me, but I like to think at least I have. I'm aware it's bothering me, and there's some level of control there.
You don't stay there too long.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really good point. Yeah.
And that's really it, isn't it? Yeah, we are all human. We are going to react as much as I can think. To be honest, I'm probably a little bit more of a reactor instantly, but it doesn't take me long to come out of it. Do you know what I mean? I don't hold on to anything. Half of it is can't remember it. So I can't hold a grudge because I can't remember it. Once it's gone,
like that person. I just don't know why.
But we are all human. There are going to be certain, and obviously one trigger for one person isn't going to be as extreme as it will be for somebody else. So yeah, we are all human. But I suppose if you can teach them the tools, That if they could, like you say, it's not going to happen overnight, but if they keep trying to use these tools and create a new habit, and then they've got something to use when they do come up against that. So what other strategies would you say people could use other than the ones you've just spoken about there?
Well, I think that they are the main ones with regards to an ongoing practice. So there's the, being aware, take a further step back, and perhaps the easiest thing to start to make a change is to say, is there a habit here of some sort? And for example, an easiest one to talk about is with children or another half or a colleague. In other words, there's a repeatable event that gets a repeatable response of, and whatever that response is that you don't like, not you, Karen, but one that's listening. So, irritated with a child, immediately wound up as a colleague walks in, assuming the worst of a particular person in your team. There's a stimulus, and this is your boom, straight to the response of they're useless, that's annoying, they never do this. And then you bring in be aware of the trigger. Bob's just walked in, adjust your breathing. And here's the bit that we haven't mentioned. It's to really think about, how do you want to respond? Just totally away from the moment, not Bob's walked in and now I'm angry, or let me figure out how I want to feel. It's, if there's a repeatable process, ask yourself separately, totally away from the situation, how do I want to respond? And let's just say you turn to nerves when a particular senior person at work walks in. So one assumes, simple example to talk about, you'd rather have at least a reasonable level of confidence or creativity or calmness. And then you think about yourself, well, okay, what does that feel like for me? How do I feel? How do I act? What do I hear? What do I see when I'm confident, when I'm calm, when I'm X, whatever that might be for you? Let's stick with confidence. And so you become aware of your state, of how it is that you are as a person when you're in the state that you want to be in. Let's stick with confidence. And so when X happens, boss walks in, senior person walks in, and you feel the trigger of you can't string a sentence together, you literally start stuttering or something at the extremes, you change your breathing, physical change, that changes your physiology, which changes your state. And the state that you change to is what you've pre-programmed to think of, and that is being confident. It doesn't mean you stand up and you challenge them for their job, but you at least stay as a strong and a positive version of yourself, a confident version of yourself. So you've got the stimulus, boss walks in, and you notice normally that's a trigger for, oh no, he's going to ask me a question, it's petrifying. And instead of that, you focus on, no, I'm going into confident mode. Change your breathing because it's called the chain of excellence. You change your breathing. I'm going to repeat the same words. You change your breathing, changes your physiology, opens your chest, for example, and that changes your state, and state impacts performance. If you think of an athlete, what state do they need to be in to run the quickest 100 meters? They're not going to stand on the waiting for the gun thinking about an argument with their other half. They're thinking about right. So what state do you want to be in? And you focus on that. And that is an extension of what we said, that 10 seconds. What do you want to do with the 10 seconds? You can focus on how you want to respond, and you associate to that so that all of a sudden you've got a level of confidence. And now I'm going to immediately remind you of what I said earlier. If we went onto a tennis court and you never played tennis, you wouldn't expect to be look like Federer or even Tim Henman, if anybody's about tennis know who that is. And likewise with this, you could get a very quick response very quickly, and it could be easy, but give yourself a chance to practice these things with regards to maybe grab hold of that saying, if it works for you, infinite well of thinking. Wow. Breathing, let me interrupt my normal pattern of behavior. I'm going to change my thinking. I can be perfectly confident in this situation. I don't like the thoughts that I was having. And you come back to it. And on a wider, if I was coaching somebody, then you would get them to associate to, there are all sorts of tools and techniques you can use pending the individual case, but a real general one is to say, okay, if you know your emotional management is X, normally in various scenarios, what's the person you want to be, and who do you know that is like that? And so what changes do you want to be making, and does that fit well with you if you were to achieve them? That kind of thing. A more, if you like, a macro, what's the big picture of what you're trying to achieve? So there's the immediate tools and techniques that might work, and then there's the bigger picture of, okay, here's Ian. He knows emotionally in certain situations X happens, and he wants to be this person over here instead. A monk for 20 years. What are you going to do to be the person that you want to be? And off we go. And then you would use different processes at different times. Check if there's things going on with beliefs. You know what I'm like. I'm person X. Well, okay, let's assess that, shall we? And then you see where the beliefs have come from. And often, if you're getting into beliefs, it's from many a year ago. You never decided yesterday that you're always angry. And it could have served you very well when you were 10, when you had unpleasant things going on at home. And that started when you were 7. And now when you're 34 and the first time somebody doesn't pass you something when you wanted them to, you get immediately annoyed because you've concluded they're useless. There are beliefs going on, there's habits of behaviour, and it's okay. You've finally taken a moment to realise it's not ideal and you want to make some changes. Here are some tools and techniques, and now let's take a step back and see, where has this come from? What are the beliefs that you're carrying with you? What can we look at in order to help you move to be the person you want to be?
Brilliant. It's I do find the whole subject matter quite fascinating, to think that, I suppose, depending on everybody's different circumstances, if you had the perfect upbringing and you're on autopilot, you're fine. For some that may not have had the perfect upbringing and they're going on autopilot, they might just not be aware that these patterns of behaviour are coming from certain things, or in case that they might not even feel that there would be any possibility of changing it, because they have been reacting that way for so many years. So really what you're telling the listeners is it's all solvable. Do you know? It's okay. It's absolutely okay. They're just patterns of behaviour patterns. They weren't born that way. No, babies are born perfect. And
babies are a blank canvas that we start sketching on. I've got a very young son, and I understand this stuff. And still, my wife and I take a step back and go, listen, X, Y, and Z is happening. And as I said before, I'm a long way from being perfect. But at least I have the self-awareness to know how things could be different, and some tools and techniques to put it in place. Let me give you an example that I think you'll appreciate from what your follow-up you just shared, is that, little Barnaby could be the perfect parentage, right? It really, and what's perfect parentage anyway? But that's a debate for another day. But so little Barnaby's at school. He's 7 years old, and it's his turn for the first time. Is where I don't know the process of teaching in schools, but let's say at 7 years old is the first time, according to the syllabus, that the kids get to stand up and read out loud to their classmates. And little Barnaby stands up, and instead of saying chef, he says chief, and everybody laughs. The teacher didn't manage it so well. Little Barnaby goes red, or is embarrassed internally and feels awful, sits down, and 25 years later, age 32, at his brother's wedding, when he's got to give the best man speech, which he avoids at all costs, he doesn't have any clue why he is so nervous to stand up and speak, and he's been like it as long as he can remember. And it's a saying by John Grinder, one of the co-founders of NLP, arguably the chap that gave the academic rigor behind many of the aspects of it, is that a problem is not the problem, it's how the problem was first encountered. And that's why I say, and so in the scenario of, if you can ever remember, and I get some feeling, probably with the help of a coach, as to where something first came from, that's a really good starting point to be able to make changes. And in that example, then, if you just understand, look how well that served you for so long. You didn't feel awful anymore all through school because you avoided talking. Well, you're 30 years old now and you're trying to be a director at a company. Let's assess if that still is serving you well, and then you can slowly but surely, well, not even that slowly, you can take people through a few processes and help them move forwards.
Well, you said yourself earlier that people can have, you've seen people have breakthroughs pretty much instantly, right?
Yeah.
Over a weekend,
Yeah.
So there is help. So people who are listening and do feel that maybe there is something, and they were reacting when they were age 4 to something, and they might be still reacting in the same way, and they've only just realised, which I suppose awareness is number one. Yeah, there is help, and Ian is your guy. So, Ian, do you think that there's more awareness around this over this past 18 months because of the pandemic? How do people need it more emotional management, or have you seen it sort of go a little bit out of whack over the last 18 months?
So that's a really good question, and it's my observation, more anecdotally than having done any statistical research, that mental health has gained more awareness, which is a good thing. And probably, sadly, at least in the UK, that it's been under-resourced as a country, and as part of our magnificent NHS. I'm not sure it's been given enough resources in order to really provide a service that would be ideal. And one part of that will be some of the stuff we're talking about. People have been in a pandemic, and so what I'm suggesting is that one of the things they can do is think about how they're responding to the current stimulus. And it's not easy, but if you're nervous about wearing face masks or not wearing face masks, if you're nervous about going out, or if you're nervous about self-isolation, if you're aware, or remember the definition right at the start, it's that emotional control that you express for yourself about a given stimulus. And this pandemic is a heck of a stimulus.
It is. What I have found personally easy is actually get rid of your TV.
Really?
At Christmas, I had my daughter up and boyfriend just before the lockdown, because he was at university. And over the Christmas period, the TV broke. And I actually thought, do you know what? I'm not going to replace it. Because at the beginning of the pandemic, I admit I had got totally caught up in the whole story. And it was my own daughters that came to me, So at least I know they've been listening to me over the years, because they came to me and said, Mum, you told us not to watch the news because it's so negative. And I'll be going, yeah, but, but this. And then I realised how correct they were. And I made a decision, and I have not replaced it. And I feel great.
But you know what? What's interesting about that is that if you were aware that for you a stimulus of the TV and the news had X result that isn't positive, and you're cutting it out, which we could all not watch the news or not watch a TV. We really could. I've got various friends that, as far as I know, they either may physically have a TV and next to never turn it on, or I can think of one or two that haven't had one for years. And fair enough. That's an example. That's you've got rid of something physical that is the one that's absolutely, by definition, is the thing providing the trigger. And in that case, it's even easier. You've got rid of the trigger. It's just I don't want to watch the news and hear how many people have died today. And that's okay. For a lot of people, they'll just see it as stats and, oh wow, this disease is really kicking in. And for others, it will slowly but surely grab hold of them in a way where, if someone doesn't grab hold of them and pull them up, I can understand that there's been a second epidemic of mental health challenges.
Oh, huge. And I admit, obviously, you can't always just get rid of the trigger. That's an easy one, a TV. But obviously, for most people, triggers could be people. We can't quite get rid of.
Well, there is a way, but I don't think it's legal.
and maybe, we can't really advise that one. But
No.
It's interesting, isn't it? That yes, I'm with you there. I do see a lot of people suffering. So, and I truly believe it's suffering unnecessarily, because what you said at the you said this sort of right at the beginning, and it just sort of made it apparent that it all is down to our perception. Everything, the whole thing is down to the way we view our world, the way we're viewing. So one person could have exactly the same stimulus and not have the reaction. So it's not the thing or the person, it's just our view on that thing. And that's just such a fascinating topic to think that, it's frustrating though, isn't it?
It can be. There's a phrase that anybody that studied any level of NLP will know, which is the map is not the territory. And that is, we may think we've all, an example of it would be, we all think we've gone through the same experience, but you'll bring your own filters to it. And so what might greatly agitate somebody else, the other person will be looking at them thinking, what is going on here? What just happened? And and that is, you haven't walked in that person's shoes. That's the phrase about walking in somebody else's shoes. Remember, we have millions of stimuli every day. And I like to remind people of the basics of, we process information through our 5 senses, and how we process information is how we store it, and how we restore it is how we recall it, applying a filter called language. And as humans, what we do with language is either distort, delete, or generalize. And so we apply this, to a given situation where perhaps we'll miss out some data. There'll be an underlying meaning. There'll be you'll apply an interpretation to something based on something totally random, and that means, and where a skilled coach will help somebody with stuff like that, or even a good mate sometimes down the pub when pubs are open, is it's the ability to realize that what you're recognizing at the surface, underneath there is a different interpretation, and it's the different interpretation that you want to try to get to. So to make sure that you're living, this will sound weird, this will be the woo-woo side of your show, I like that. But it's sort of making sure that you're living in your own reality. People interpret things it's the stuff of the unconscious without realizing it. And then with good questioning and a bit of reflection, you can go from how they're currently seeing things to what lies underneath. And then they're looking at their reality, at least as it is. And then you can make the choices of, do I want to make changes? Am I giving this a fair definition and interpretation? And you can apply all the other stuff that we've spoken about.
I suppose that just links back. Actually, what you've just said there links back to what you said earlier about being aware enough to actually just for a moment think of the other person. So it's the same thing, isn't it? So it's basically saying, there are other ways of looking at this, not just my one right now. So
absolutely. That's a tremendous. Yeah, there's a tremendous process called perceptual positions, and it's, as it suggests, it's taking the time to perceive a given situation or a given exchange from someone else's perspective. And if you actually go through the process of imagining yourself as the other person, really imagining it, how do they breathe? How quickly do they talk? Are they bigger than you, smaller than you? Is it a funny accent to you? Is it really try to be the other person, and then look back at yourself just as one aspect of that exercise? It's very quick and easy to say, but if someone really gets stuck into it, you see people having an emotional connection and getting a new perspective. And therefore, again, is that thing called choice. Okay, I've got a new perspective now. What do I do with that information? And you can choose to go forwards in a new way. I ran a little workshop the other day on emotional management, states and strategies, I think I'm calling it. And I got them to, there was a group of about 20, and I think I was quite tight on time, to be honest. Rather than take one person through and do one detail, I took all 20 of them through it to just self-manage, but talk them through the process. And I said just at the end, anybody got any examples? And a lady had got a totally different perspective from how she interacts with her daughter. And she said, honestly, this will change the way I act as a parent. And it's
go.
just, and it was a 5-minute exercise just to go through and get the different perspective. And you try to get the perspective of a totally independent person as well, and then go back to being yourself and absorb the knowledge that you've just gained.
I think that would help any parent, and again, myself included here, when your children are acting up or doing something you don't want them to do and react, it's always coming from your perspective. Well, I want you to tidy that bedroom, or I want you to do that. And if we were to, for a moment, put ourselves in their position, they're like, that's the last thing they're thinking of. But they're not seeing it from our perspective. It's just such a fascinating subject. But it really, everything you've said here today goes back to the one thing, or this is what I'm personally taking from what you've just talked about here today, that really we should find a way to just for a moment think about the other person's views, not just be so rigid in our own point of view, because nothing's rigid, right? Nothing's set in stone. There's no right or wrong either, just because I might think I'm right all the time.
The only thing clarify I'd say is you use the word should, and I would propose, you could try this on, and I'd be curious to know as to how you get on with it. Not you again, not Karen.
There you go. Language, the language we use, that goes to show how important that is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just there are options, and I was about to talk about that. Sometimes when somebody's close to you, if someone's very close to me, like other half or immediate family or very close friends, I really don't want to coach them. I do not want to change those relationships. I might, obviously you have conversations and you're happy to make suggestions, but invariably someone has to want these things. That again, you talked about earlier, older sayings, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So you can hold up these mirrors and you can make suggestions and you can show some guidance and some facilitation. But somebody normally wants to recognize that maybe things could be different and even, dare I say, better. And then working with a coach or self-reflection or listening to something like our conversation and really grabbing hold of it and trying to run with it, then I think they absolutely can make changes, and quite quickly. It won't necessarily be easy, and it won't necessarily be total. I put my hand up to that one straight away. It's, I know about this stuff a lot, and I still have my moments. But if somebody chooses to want to have a different response, wants to have a different life going forwards, there are processes and steps and ways that they can absolutely go on a journey to start that process, for sure.
Right, but you said that there, it's got to come from within. It's got to be their choice. You can't force somebody to change, right?
You can have an influence. You can ask questions just casually as you part company. I'm really curious to know how you get on when you choose to think about your situation at work, like we discussed, and then just leave, and hopefully that settles in. But invariably, the changes will come because that person not only says, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll let you know," but Ian, I might have some questions for you. Is that okay? Of course it is. Amazing. Ask whatever you like, whenever you like. And then the person's making the effort, and off they go. There's one other thing I wanted to share with you and your listeners, just because you could imagine a scenario where more than one person is listening to this and they're going, even to themselves, but what I'm like, or yes, that's fine for others, but I've tried all this stuff before and it just doesn't work because they tried once for 27 seconds and they weren't a new person. Call me cynical. Again, this is an area, like I mentioned, 3 principles. I'm absolutely not an expert in neuroscience by any stretch of the imagination, but I read a fair bit around a particular area called neuroplasticity, which is the element of how our brain changes. And in NLP, there's also something called New Code NLP, and they are games. They're the New Code games, and it's about an element of it is the cross-lateralization of the brain and really if you like, in the simplest of terms, activating the whole brain to put you into what's called a high performance state or a highly effective state. And I was reading about neuroplasticity, and in the end, cutting a longer story short, I reached out to the major science prize winner. I think it's called the Kevlar Prize or something. When basically, and I'm really sorry, I've forgotten the guy's name. It's Michael something. He's won the major science prize around his work for neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity talks about the fact that they used to think, I don't know how many decades ago this is, but they used to think if I wave my hand like this, X part of the brain will light up. And those connections can never change. And it's called localization. And that's what they used to believe. I think for, I want to say probably over a century or something of science, they thought that that's how the brain worked. It got fixed. But what they now know, and this is the neuroplasticity bit, that the brain can mend itself and can change and is flexible to the point where that's why you might, it's almost like an anecdotal understanding that if somebody that has lost their sight, they may have heightened other senses. And that's because the brain, the visual cortex is an enormous part of the brain. And if it's not being used as a visual cortex, it doesn't do nothing. Other uses will absorb it. And so all of a sudden it kind of makes some kind of sense to me. And again, I really apologize to anyone that's listening with more knowledge and says he's talking nonsense. I think this is correct, that the brain starts to, the bits that aren't being used in a traditional way will start to be used by other aspects of what you're doing. And it goes on to say that saying of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, which is what some people will be telling themselves, is simply scientifically not true.
Rubbish.
It absolutely takes longer, and that's why a child, and there is something about a child's brain up to about age 7 that it is literally the neural pathways form easier, literally easier, so they learn languages quicker. And I think the time frame that they came up with, that as adults, if we, and I apologize because I don't quite know what it means by regularly, but I think it meant as little as something like if 20 minutes a day, half an hour a day, every day you try a new skill, after about 10 weeks, you will start to absorb it. Now, obviously, there's going to be a range. Some people, I'm not particularly, I love music, but I'm not particularly skilled musically, well, far from it, not particularly, I'm not skilled. But I accept that if I chose to start to learn the guitar, I might be slower than others, but after about 10 weeks or so, the way I understand it is my brain will start to light up in different ways because I've tried so hard for so long, and I will start to become easier to absorb the new skill. If I hand it to my very young son, as long as there's a guitar small enough, it will just be part of what he is in about 3 months.
I 100% believe that. 100%. We, never stop learning. So there you go, everyone. Never stop learning.
And that, if that's the fun stuff about, go and learn tennis, learn the guitar, jiu-jitsu, swimming, whatever it is. These are all physical things, whatever it is, poetry, painting, whatever. But likewise, this is the bit that I've mentioned a couple of times already. It may not be easy for you to breathe and take your time because normally you call yourself a fiery person and you know what I'm like. I have to shout somebody down in the cafe. But no, you don't. And it won't be, you may be the same tomorrow, you may be the same the day after. But if you try and apply this stuff for a sustained period of time, it will start to work. You will have a difference. It will make changes and you will get the outcomes that you want.
So in other words, everyone has the power to change no matter how old they are.
Absolutely.
Cool. So if anybody is listening and they would like to find out more, you just mentioned there that you run some courses as well, some workshops. For those, if they're just listening on the radio and they can't see any of the links, how do they contact you? What is your website?
So the easiest one with what refers to what we've been talking about is NLP Impact. And when you go to it, you'll see there's a dash in the middle, but you don't need the dash. I think it's both websites point to the same thing. So it's nlp-impact.com, and there's a contact us on there. And I'm also very easy to find on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of contacts. So if you search my name, I normally come somewhere near the top because I've got a lot of contacts on LinkedIn. And then you'll see finance director, coach, trainer, magician. I'm not a magician. That was a joke.
You wear many hats. So what, out of everything that you do, Ian, what are you really most passionate about?
I think it's hard to beat the pleasure of the one-to-one coaching and the impact you have. I am a business geek to my core. I trained from very young and I still enjoy it. So I enjoy business things. Though obviously there's some stuff I don't like, but the aspect of sitting down, understanding what's going on for a business, whether it's to change a process or really understand the drivers or to raise finance or whatever, just the core element of how we're driving this business forward, I enjoy. But there's something very special about helping somebody go from A to B. If you just help somebody realize something, like change a relationship they had and what was holding them back, or even I coached somebody not so recently now. It was in the pandemic when we were allowed to meet in person. Somebody had an anxiety with driving. So this is really classic NLP stuff as opposed to business things. But they had a lot, in their own words, a lifelong anxiousness about driving, and we got rid of it in 3 sessions. They paid for 4 sessions, and they took the 4th session on something else months later.
Wow.
And it's just, there are tools and techniques you can use. Again, it's the same, but it's the same stuff. How are you processing it? Where has it come from? How is it showing up today? And what process can we take you through to help you realize that things can change and you see things, hear things, and sense things a different way? And
there you go. Wow. So you did that's a huge transformation for somebody, and it just goes to show that so many people think these things are so set in stone and there's nothing that can change it. But really what you've said over this last hour is that it's all of it is, we at the end of the day, we think we aren't all different. We are all the same. The way we process things are the same. So it just goes to show that with the right guidance, with the right tools in place, that whatever is holding us back, however long we've been repeating those same habit patterns, it can be changed. So it all starts with just a conversation. So if anybody out there is listening and there are things that they would like to change, then reach out to Ian, start the conversation going. So thank you.
It'd be a pleasure,
Ian.
by the way. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
And I really sincerely, I think I've already said, I enjoy that aspect of it. So if somebody is listening and they think they've got a challenge with something and they want to run it past me, I'm really happy to try to help. And I'm not, the first thing I'm not going to do is send an invoice for them to complete. It's if someone's got a particular challenge and they want help with something and they just think it's a quick win, I'll happily try to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Absolutely fascinating. And the whole sort of, this isn't, I've considered studying NLP at times before. It is a fascinating subject matter, but I love talking to people like you that know what they're talking about.
On a good day.
And it's just such a wide subject. And I do, I suppose this is the whole point of this show is, we are also focused on the physical aspect of the lives. What is there here and now, and actually the mental. And okay, you did do a little bit of sprinkling of woo woo in there. It was a tiny little bit, but the mental. I
could have ramped it up, but I stopped myself.
Oh no, don't! I love the woo woo, But I do if it's all encompassing, and I think more and more people, especially as you said during the pandemic, have come to that realization that the mental health is just as important. Well, it's all the same. It's linked to our physical health.
Oh, absolutely. In my opinion, absolutely. We are what we're here. Here's the last one to leave you with. And I don't know where I heard this. I'd like to think I invented it, but I don't think I did. We are what we think. That's my opinion. We are what we think. And if you remember that saying of we have an infinite well of thinking, and if you don't like it or it's not serving you, you can change it. May not be always easy, but it is undeniable.
Awesome. How fantastic to finish on. Thank you so much for your time. Absolutely brilliant. And to the listeners, I will see you, or you will hear me anyway, next week on A Coffee with Karen. Thanks.
Bye.
Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.